Hey friends, I'm back after having kind of a long bout with COVID. So I still sound kind of congested, but I'm feeling a lot better. And I wanted to kind of go back in my story and revisit the topic of DCIS. I know that not very many of you who follow me nowadays have seen my earliest videos about DCIS. They were about 2 years ago, exactly. A couple of years ago, they started seeing DCIS in my left breast, which I eventually got a mastectomy on. And it wasn't diagnosable until almost a year later. And then I didn't have my mastectomy until another 6 or 9 months after that. And I really was struggling about whether to have the lumpectomy or mastectomy because of my DCIS. And I haven't ever kind of gone back and revisited some of the factors and some of the things that I've learned since my mastectomy, as I have been talking to many oncologists about the way that DCIS works. And so I wanted to share today just the one most important thing that I would have liked to know about DCIS, and the thing that took me 6 oncologists to find out, and much searching on my own, as well as searching and asking those oncologists about the nature and the danger of DCIS. So I was one of those people who was playing it slow and carefully and not willing to give up my breast because of DCIS, because I had read so many studies about the fact that women with DCIS were living long, healthy lives, and the DCIS was not necessarily growing in them. And a lot of these studies were done in Europe, but some of them have been recently done in the US as well. And so DCIS, or ductal carcinoma in situ, sounds like a cancer. It is not considered to be cancer. It's called precancer, or potential cancer, I guess is a better way of describing it. And if you know nothing about it, that's kind of the basics about it. It is a very confusing diagnosis. It is something that is very likely to be diagnosed because now we have high power mammograms and ultrasounds that can detect it a lot earlier than we could before. So a lot of women are getting diagnosed with it. A lot of their surgeons or oncologists are telling them that they need to get lumpectomies or mastectomies as a result of it. And I was pretty upset about that at first because reading the data, reading the literature, I was seeing that that was a little bit of an overtreatment for a lot of women, and I didn't want to be one of those women. I didn't want to lose my breast or part of my breast just willy-nilly because some surgeon wanted more business and had the ability to call it standard of care to take part of my breast or all of my breast for the sake of this DCIS. So after it was spotted in my breast, hadn't been diagnosed yet, but it took about 2 years before I was willing to have it excised out of me. And even at the time that I had my mastectomy and was willing to have it, it had been growing quite a bit and pretty visibly apparent that it was not staying still or static at that point. So it was pretty clear I needed to do something at that point. But for a lot of women, it will not grow, even after you've had biopsies to identify it and diagnose it. My biopsy caused mine to grow because I have a lot of growth factors and just that tendency for things to grow in me when I've been injured. A lot of women don't have that factor. So it's a lot of kind of variables when it comes to women with DCIS. But the thing that I learned this last January, this January of this year, that was so stunning and remarkable to me and so simple was just this very simple fact that research hospitals are using as the way to tell if DCIS is dangerous, if it is something that will become cancerous. Because like I said, much of it becomes very static, very small, stay small for the rest of your life. You can live with it the rest of your life and die of other causes and shouldn't even be worried about it in many cases. What Dr. Mukhtar told me when I went down to UCSF, University of California in San Francisco, in January of this year, was that there is a way to tell if DCIS is becoming troublesome or dangerous. And that is called something called comedo necrosis. It's a condition where your duct, your milk duct, which is the location of most breast cancers and most precancers or potential cancers, it's like a kind of like a tube or a straw in its shape and form, like a tunnel And the thing that makes DCIS so tame and unthreatening in many cases is that it just really does stay put. That's why it's called in situ. It stays put in that straw or tunnel of your milk duct in your breast. Never goes anywhere, never grows beyond it. Comedo necrosis is the technical medical term that you will see either in a biopsy or sometimes in an MRI, where it is clear that that milk duct, that tunnel or straw, is blocked. And it is blocked by usually mostly dead cancer cells. Cancer cells that your body has successfully fought off and killed. And probably a few living cancer cells as well, because the concept of it is that that straw is getting filled up or blocked or clogged. Comedo means clogged, to the extent that active cancer cells will start breaking out of that milk duct. And that is when you're really in trouble, is when they start breaking out. And so if you're looking to get to the point of kind of no return or danger where it could become invasive ductal carcinoma, which is a real cancer and something you don't want to mess with, then you want to be watching for comedo necrosis. In my experience, you will watch for it more often if you have growth factors or a rapidly growing DCIS like I did. Again, for me, it was a 2-year process, and I had many, many MRIs, ultrasounds, and a couple of mammograms in that 2 years. And so I was able to see when that diagnosis of comedo necrosis did happen. Unfortunately, when I saw those words on my test results, I didn't know that that's what they meant. And so that's why I'm making this video as a peer, not as a medical professional, but as a peer survivor of cancer, or precancer in this case. I also had some invasive cancer that was totally unrelated to my DCIS. I just wanted to share that information because I know that not everyone can go to experts who are not defensive, who are willing to share their knowledge, unlike a lot of oncologists. Now, I believe that many of my oncologists that I talked to, the first 5 that I talked to, probably didn't know that sophisticated level of knowledge that had been discovered, that comedo necrosis was the danger factor. If they did know it, they were in a space where they just didn't want to share their scientific knowledge with me, even though I was exhibiting the ability to understand that knowledge as a nutritionist, as a researcher, a very curious one who was eager to see the studies that they were looking at. They still didn't share that with me for whatever reason. And so I'm guessing that yours might not be sharing that with you either. And so that's why I wanted to make this really short video. Just again, not as a medical professional, I'm standing in the shoes of a peer, someone who's learned this the hard and long way and would have liked to learn it earlier. And I'm kicking myself because anyone who, like myself, has the ability with insurance to go out of state and go to a better real research hospital like UCSF or Fred Hutch up in Seattle, I really encourage you to do that early on in your scans, in your studying, in your kind of progressing through this precancer diagnosis. I really wish I had gone down to San Francisco a little bit earlier in this story. So if you look back at my early videos, I was pretty upset about the fact that some of these doctors and oncologists were wanting me to take my breast, cut into my breast, when I only had this potential cancer situation. Do I have any regrets? Well, I think I would have done it a few months earlier, honestly, if I had known about this factor. So yeah, I do have a little bit of a regret. I think I would have been able to keep more skin, potentially keep my nipple. Maybe I would have chosen to have a lumpectomy instead of a mastectomy. Probably not. And I'm really glad that I got a mastectomy because, again, we did discover a totally unrelated, active, invasive case of lobular carcinoma, which is usually invisible. And I would have never known about it if I hadn't had my mastectomy. So in the end, I'm very glad about what I did and when I did it. But if I could look back and kind of steer my path a little differently, I might have done it a few months earlier. Just knowing about this little diagnosis, this little thing that happens in your scans and imaging reports called comedo necrosis. Again, comedo means clogged or plugged passageway. Necrosis usually means dead cells, but in the case of DCIS, it could mean mostly dead cells with a few living and active cells. And that's what we're really most scared of, is those active cells that could break through. I had a second pathology review. Actually, my first one was up here in Portland, and my second one was down at UCSF after I saw Dr. Mukhtar. She recommended a second pathology review just to make sure I didn't have any invasive ductal carcinoma, because I did have so much comedo necrosis in those ducts, in those tunnels in my breast. And what they found is I did not have any breakthrough invasion. I did not have any ductal carcinoma, which is the much more common kind of breast cancer that women do get. Again, talk to your oncologist about all of these things. Definitely take this just as a little bit of input, added education from a peer, especially if you're being told that you don't really have cancer and you shouldn't worry about your DCIS, because I was told that a lot. A lot of Facebook groups tell you that DCIS is not cancer. It's true, it's not cancer, it's potential cancer. I do think it's legitimately called precancer, because it does have a lot of potential to grow and break through. But in most cases it doesn't. So it is just super tricky. I'll leave it at that for today. I just wanted to share that big thing, that big discovery that I learned earlier this year that I didn't make a video about. And so if you're interested and you're studying DCIS, if you have it, and you're wondering whether to have surgery, my story is pretty interesting, because I did hold off for 2 years. And like I said, I probably wouldn't have held out quite that long if I had understood that I did have those growth factors and I was achieving comedo necrosis. So hopefully this helps you, and I will talk to you in my next video very soon. Bye-bye.